The warlord's throne room was filled with laughter, loud, cruel, alien laughter. The mercenaries stood tall, their armored bodies reflecting the dim red lights of the chamber. They were the Drakvar, the most feared warriors in the galaxy. They had fought in 100 wars, conquered planets, and wiped out entire species. No army had ever stood against them and survived. General Vok, their leader, grinned as he looked at the holographic map before him. Humans. This is a joke, right? His deep voice echoed in the chamber. The warlord, a towering insect-like creature known as Xalzur, hissed. No joke, General. The humans have refused to surrender my new colony. I want them gone. Vok scoffed. You called us for this. A few weak primates. He turned to his soldiers, shaking his head. I thought we were hired for a real war. The Drakvar laughed again. They had seen humans before, fragile, small creatures that relied on machines to fight. They were not warriors. Xalzur's mandibles clicked. These humans are different. They sent only a small unit, but they have already destroyed 2 of my best strike teams. Vok's amusement faded slightly. A small unit? How many? 10. The laughter stopped. 10. That was impossible. Vok narrowed his eyes. You mean 10 squads? Xalzur shook his head. No, 10 soldiers. The room fell into silence. The Drakvar were ruthless killers, but even they had learned to respect strong enemies. The idea that 10 humans could destroy entire strike teams was strange. One of Vok's captains, a massive warrior named Jorvak, growled. They probably used bombs or poison. Humans fight like cowards. Xalzur nodded. Perhaps, but they fight well. I need you to finish this. Kill the humans and take back my colony. Vok smirked. Don't worry, warlord. By this time tomorrow, those humans will be nothing but ashes. The Drakvar warriors stomped their feet in agreement. They were mercenaries, killers, conquerors. No species could match their strength. No species could scare them. Certainly not humans. Hours later, the Drakvar warship entered the planet's atmosphere. The colony below was small, mostly forests and mountains, with a few human-built structures near the center. Their scanners picked up no large army, no heavy weapons, no war machines. Vok stood on the bridge, watching the display. Where are they? He muttered. Jorvak frowned. Hiding, probably. Vok nodded. Then let's smoke them out. Send in the scouts. The Drakvar sent their best trackers into the jungle. These were elite hunters, skilled in finding and eliminating targets. They moved swiftly, scanning for heat signatures, listening for movements. An hour passed. Then 2. Then, silence. Vok's communicator crackled. A voice, shaking with fear. G. General. There. Static. Vok's blood ran cold. Report. What happened? No response. One by one, the signals from the scouts disappeared. No gunfire. No explosions. No bodies left behind. They were simply gone. Jorvak swallowed hard. This isn't normal. For the first time in his life, General Vok felt something he had never felt before. Doubt. The Drakvar had come expecting an easy fight. Now, they weren't so sure. The jungle was too quiet, too perfect. The Drakvar were trained warriors, but even they could sense when something was wrong. Vok stood at the edge of the clearing, his claws gripping his plasma rifle tightly. He had sent out 20 of his best scouts, and not a single one had returned. No bodies, no screams, no sign of a fight. Just silence. Jorvak stepped beside him, his massive form tense. This isn't war, he muttered. This is something else. Vok didn't answer. He had led countless battles, faced ruthless enemies, but never had he seen anything like this. Humans were supposed to be weak, predictable. If they wanted to fight, they should be using heavy weapons, tanks, or air support. Not this. He activated his communicator. All squads, move in. Full assault. Within seconds, the jungle came alive with movement. Hundreds of Drakvar soldiers advanced, weapons ready. Their infrared scanners swept the trees, searching for any sign of the enemy. Still nothing. Then, the first scream came. A soldier on the left flank. It was cut short, too fast. The others turned, but there was nothing there, only the rustling leaves. Another scream. This time on the right. A Drakvar warrior fired his weapon wildly into the darkness, but his plasma shots hit only trees. Panic started to spread. Where are they? A soldier shouted. Something moved. Fast, too fast for their scanners to track. A shadow between the trees, a blur in the mist. Then the gunfire began, but it wasn't from the Drakvar. It was from the humans. Precise shots, one bullet, one kill. The Drakvar fell one by one. Headshots, throat shots, no wasted ammunition, no wild shooting. Every shot counted. Fall back, Vok roared. But there was nowhere to run. The jungle was a trap. Explosions ripped through the clearing. Not massive blasts, just controlled detonations, placed in the perfect spots to cut off escape routes. The Drakvar were not being fought. They were being hunted. Jorvak swung his rifle toward the movement in the trees and fired. Plasma rounds tore through the leaves, but the human was already gone. Too fast. A voice crackled through the Drakvar's open channel. A human voice. Calm. Cold. You should have stayed away. Vok's blood turned to ice. This was no normal enemy. This was something else. The jungle was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard. The Drakvar warriors, once so confident, were now running. But there was nowhere to run. Vok gritted his teeth as he crouched behind a fallen tree, his massive frame heaving. Around him, his soldiers were breathing hard, their fear obvious. They weren't used to fear. The Drakvar were conquerors, killers. They had fought wars across the galaxy. But this wasn't war. This was slaughter. Jorvak was beside him, his rifle shaking slightly in his grip. General, I don't understand. This isn't possible. His voice, usually full of confidence, was now full of doubt. Vok peeked over the log, scanning the dense trees. Nothing. He activated his infrared vision. Still nothing. The humans weren't just killing them. They were ghosts. No heat signatures, no movement that could be tracked. Only death. A rustling in the distance. Vok held up a fist. The remaining Drakvar froze. A shadow moved through the trees. Fast. Precise. A human shape, just for a moment. Then gone. Vok's instincts screamed at him. Fire. His soldiers unloaded plasma rounds into the jungle. The trees burned. The air filled with smoke. The ground shook. Silence. Jorvak exhaled. Did we get them? Then the whisper came. From behind them. No. Jorvak spun, his eyes wide. But he was already too late. A blade flashed through the darkness. A clean cut. The Drakvar captain gurgled as blood sprayed from his throat. He collapsed, clawing at the wound, his lifeblood spilling onto the forest floor. Vok fired wildly, but there was nothing there, just the rustling leaves, the echoes of death. Then the radio crackled again, that same human voice, calm, controlled, mocking. You thought this would be easy. Vok's pulse pounded in his head. He grabbed his communicator. All squads, regroup, fall back to the drop zone. No response. He switched channels. Anyone? Report. Silence. His warriors, his army, were gone. He looked around, his breathing heavy. 5 soldiers were left. Only 5. Out of hundreds. This was a nightmare. A trap they had never seen coming. The human's voice came through the radio one last time. There's no escape. Vok turned, rage replacing his fear. Face me, coward. Fight me like a real warrior. A soft chuckle. Oh, you're not the one we want. Then, the world exploded. The blast sent Vok hurtling backward, his armor absorbing most of the impact, but the force still knocked the air from his lungs. He rolled, his claws digging into the dirt as he struggled to push himself up. Around him, the last of his warriors lay scattered, some motionless, others groaning in pain. Smoke filled the air, thick and suffocating. The jungle, once dense and alive, was now a battlefield of fire and shadows. Through the ringing in his ears, Vok could hear them. The humans. Not shouting, not charging, moving. Silent, precise. Ghosts in the smoke. He bared his teeth and forced himself to his feet. Show yourselves. He roared, his voice filled with frustration and something else. Something he would never admit. Fear. A flicker of movement. He fired, his plasma rifle sending a bolt of energy through the smoke. It hit nothing. Another movement, this time to his left. He swung, firing again. Still nothing. Then he felt it, the cold steel against his throat. A whisper. Close. Too close. You're not so loud now, General. Vok's entire body froze. The human had gotten behind him. He hadn't heard, hadn't sensed anything. This was impossible. He, a Drakvar warlord, a veteran of countless wars, was now standing with a blade pressed against his throat like a helpless recruit. Slowly, his eyes moved to the side, trying to see his attacker. But he saw nothing. Just shadows in the smoke. Then, the pressure on his throat disappeared. Vok spun, swinging his rifle like a club, but there was no one there. His breathing was ragged, his heart hammering. His warriors, where were they? He looked around wildly. They were gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just gone. His radio crackled. That same voice, calm, almost amused. You should have left when you had the chance. Vok's claws clenched around his rifle. Cowards. He spat. You fight like vermin. Silence. Then a soft chuckle. And yet, here you are. Alone. Vok's breathing was heavy. They were toying with him. No, not just him. The Drakvar Empire. This wasn't just a battle. This wasn't just a war. This was a warning. A sudden sharp pain in his leg made him collapse to one knee. He looked down. A small, precise cut just above his knee joint, deep enough to cripple, not to kill. Then another cut. This time on his shoulder. His grip on his rifle weakened. He swung wildly, but he was striking at ghosts. Another cut. His wrist. His weapon fell. Then finally, a boot pressed against his chest. He fell back, hitting the ground hard. He looked up, and through the smoke, he finally saw one of them. A human soldier. Not bulky, not armored like the Drakvar, but efficient. Deadly. A black visor covered his face, his stance calm, controlled. Vok's breathing was shallow. He had never known defeat. Not like this. Not by an enemy who didn't even break a sweat. The soldier tilted his head slightly. Tell your people, he said quietly. Next time, we won't be so merciful. Vok opened his mouth to speak, to protest, to curse. But before he could, darkness took him. Pain. That was the first thing Vok felt as he regained consciousness. A deep, pulsing agony spread through his body, his nerves burning with every movement. His vision was blurry, his surroundings unfamiliar. He was alive, but barely. He tried to move, but his limbs were weak, trembling. His weapons were gone. His armor was damaged. His warriors, missing. He forced himself to sit up, his breathing ragged. The jungle around him was eerily silent. No signs of battle. No bodies. No blood. As if the fight had never happened. But it had. He remembered the shadows moving through the smoke, the precise cuts, the whispers in his ear. The human soldier standing over him. A chill ran through him. This wasn't war. This was humiliation. The Drakvar were conquerors. They did not lose. They did not beg. They did not fear. And yet, he had feared. He had felt it, crawling up his spine like a living thing. The fear of something stronger, something smarter, something beyond his understanding. He forced himself to his feet, ignoring the sharp pain in his leg. He had to get back to his ship. He had to warn his people. Vok activated his communicator. Static. He growled, adjusting the frequency. A signal came through, weak, but there. "This is General Vok," he rasped. "All surviving units, respond." Silence. Then, finally, a voice. Weak. Desperate. "General, I." The transmission cut off with a sharp gasp. A sound Vok recognized. A death rattle. His blood ran cold. They were still out there, the humans. A rustling in the trees. Vok's instincts screamed at him. He turned, claws ready, expecting another ambush. But there was nothing. He wasn't sure what was worse, the battle itself, or the silence that followed. He stumbled forward, forcing himself to move. He had to leave. Now, his ship was docked a few miles away, near the edge of the jungle. If he could reach it, he could escape. He could warn the Drakvar High Command that humans were not what they seemed, that they were something else, something worse. His claws dug into the dirt as he climbed up a ridge, just a little farther. The pain in his leg was unbearable, but he couldn't stop. Then he saw it. The clearing, his ship, and the humans. They stood in the open, waiting, not hiding, not running, waiting. A dozen of them, dressed in black, weapons at their sides. Their helmets concealed their faces, but Vok didn't need to see their expressions to know what they were thinking. They had already won. His hands clenched into fists. He was General Vok. He would not surrender. He would fight until his last breath. He took a step forward. Then one of the humans raised a hand. Vok froze. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a command. It was a dismissal, as if to say, "Go, tell them what you saw." Vok's claws twitched. Every instinct screamed at him to charge, to fight, to reclaim his honor. But honor meant nothing if he was dead. His jaw clenched. His pride burned. But he turned, and he ran. Because for the first time in his life, he knew he was outmatched. Vok ran, his powerful legs pushing through the dense jungle, his breath ragged, his heart pounding like a war drum. Shame burned hotter than his wounds. Every step felt like an admission of failure, but he had no choice. The humans had let him go. They had spared him, not out of mercy, but out of something far worse. Certainty. They knew he posed no threat. They knew he would carry their message back to the Drakvar High Command. And that message was clear. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. His ship was close. He could see the metal hull gleaming through the trees, the entrance ramp still open. But something felt wrong. The air was too still. He slowed, his claws tightening into fists. His senses screamed at him. A trap. Vok reached for his communicator again. "Command, this is General Vok. Do you read me?" Static. He growled. He needed to reach orbit, to send a direct transmission from his ship. He forced himself forward, his wounded leg screaming in protest. A few more steps, just a few more. Then he saw it. A body. One of his warriors lay at the foot of the ramp, face down, motionless. His armor was intact, no burns, no wounds. Just dead. Vok stopped, his breathing slowed. They were here. He scanned the area, his claws flexing, ready to fight. But there was nothing. No movement, no sound. The jungle had swallowed them whole. He took another step toward the ship, then another. His ears twitched, listening for even the slightest noise. Then, as he reached the ramp, a whisper. "You should have run faster." Vok spun, claws out. but there was no one there. Then something sharp pressed against the back of his neck. Cold, unyielding, inside. Now, the voice was calm. Too calm. Vok gritted his teeth. He had no weapon, no backup. And they had his ship. He growled low in his throat, but he obeyed, stepping up the ramp. For now, the interior was dark, the emergency lights casting a red glow. He could smell something metallic in the air. Blood. The doors slid shut behind him. He was trapped. Sit. He turned slowly. 3 of them. Human soldiers, still wearing black, still faceless behind their visors. Their weapons were holstered, but Vok knew better than to think that meant he was safe. These humans didn't need weapons to kill. One of them tilted his head. We could have killed you already. Vok bared his teeth. Then why haven't you? A pause. Then the human stepped closer. To deliver a message. Vok's claws twitched. You think I will carry your words like some messenger? The soldier chuckled softly. Oh, General, you already are. Vok's rage burned. They had humiliated him. They had broken his army, slaughtered his warriors, and let him live. And now, they thought they could use him. The human continued, voice calm, controlled. Too controlled. The Drakvar believe they own the galaxy. That no species can stand against them. That every war they start, they win. He leaned closer. That ends now. Vok's claws dug into his palms. You are fools if you think. A sudden click. Vok froze. A device had been placed in his hands. Small, simple, a data chip. The human stepped back. Take that to your leaders. Vok narrowed his eyes. What is it? The soldier's visor reflected the dim red light. Proof. Vok's grip tightened around the chip. His instincts screamed at him to crush it, to defy them. But he didn't. Because deep down, beneath his rage, beneath his pride, he needed to know. Another pause. Then the soldier gave a final chilling command. Now go. And just like that, the doors opened again. They were letting him leave. Again. Vok's claws trembled as he stepped out into the night. For the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if the Drakvar were the strongest in the galaxy anymore. Vok sat in the command chair of his warship, staring at the small data chip in his claws. It felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. Around him, his bridge officers worked in silence, their eyes flicking toward him, but saying nothing. They could sense something was wrong. He was not the same General Vok who had led them into battle. He had failed. The Drakvar were warriors, conquerors. Fear was for the weak, for the prey. But the humans had turned the hunters into the hunted. They had fought in a way that defied everything the Drakvar knew about war. They did not march. They did not challenge. They did not fight for honor. They had simply won. Vok's claws tapped against the chip. The humans had given it to him as a message, as proof. But proof of what? That they were dangerous. That they were more than the Drakvar had ever imagined. Or was it something worse? He hesitated, then inserted the chip into the console before him. A single file appeared. A video. Vok exhaled sharply and played it. The screen flickered, then displayed a battlefield, but not the one he had fought on. This was somewhere else. Another world. Another war. The footage was grainy, taken from the perspective of a helmet cam, a human soldier's perspective. The scene was chaos. Alien warriors, not Drakvar, but another species, screamed as they were cut down. Not by heavy artillery, not by massive warships, but by a handful of humans. They moved like phantoms, silent, precise, unstoppable. Vok watched as an enemy warrior, easily twice the size of the humans, charged forward, roaring. In a flash, one of the humans dodged, twisted, and struck, a blade, clean and quick. The massive warrior fell, lifeless before he even hit the ground. One by one, the enemy forces fell. There was no mercy, No hesitation. The humans moved with an efficiency that terrified Vok more than any weapon ever had. The video ended with a final image, a battlefield of the dead. The humans had stood against an army that should have overwhelmed them. Instead, they had erased it. The screen went black. Vok sat frozen, his mind racing. The Drakvar had always believed themselves superior, stronger, smarter, more advanced. But the humans had changed everything. He clenched his fists. This was not a war they could win. Not by brute force. Not by the strategies they had used against weaker species. No. If the Drakvar Empire wanted to survive, they had only two choices: adapt or be destroyed. The bridge was silent, waiting for his command. He knew what they expected him to say. To call for vengeance. To rally their forces and strike back. But Vok was no fool. He leaned forward, staring at the blank screen. Then, in a low, measured voice, he gave the order. Set course for home. His officers hesitated. One of them turned, confused. General. Vok's claws dug into the armrest. He could not tell them the truth. Not yet. Now, he growled. The engines roared to life. The ship turned, leaving the cursed jungle planet behind. As the stars stretched before him, Vok knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning.